He gave my crews to his frat brother and called me a dinosaur. I walked out with 23 foremen and $890 million in pending bids. The conference room smelled like it always did. Printer toner and coffee that had been on the burner since 6 a.m. Mahogany table polished to a shine nobody in field operations ever asked for. Windows overlooking the Dallas skyline, 15 cranes visible from where I sat, and I could name the project attached to every single one of them. Cody Kellner sat at the head of the table, 30 years old, slim-fit suit at a construction company, designer glasses he didn't need, clear lenses, fashion frames, cologne so thick it hit you in the hallway before he rounded the corner. His Wharton class ring caught the overhead light every time he moved his hand, which was often because he kept touching it like a nervous habit he didn't know he had. Behind him stood Trent Prescott, arms crossed, golf tan, loafers. The kind of guy who'd never set foot on a foundation pour and didn't see why that mattered. The HR rep, Janet, stood to the side holding a tablet. She wouldn't look at me. She'd worked here 11 years. She knew what was happening. Cody didn't look up from his laptop when he said it. We're modernizing field operations, Brock. The company needs scalable leadership. Someone who can modernize the way we deploy crews across markets. He said modernize twice in one breath and didn't notice. We've decided to go in a different direction. Trent will be heading up field operations, effective today. He kept typing while he said it. I sat across from them. My hard hat was on the chair beside me, dusty, scratched, the crew patch stitched to the side. I could feel the challenge coin in my right pocket. Bronze, worn smooth at the edges, 24 years of my thumb finding it in moments like this. My thumb found it now. I looked at the framed photo on the wall behind Cody's head. A strip mall in Plano, 1982, first Kellner Price project. Walter Kellner standing in front of it with concrete dust on his boots and a grin like a man who just built something real. I asked one question. Does your father know? Cody's fingers stopped on the keyboard, just for a second. He didn't answer. I nodded, stood up, picked up my hard hat. I understand. Walked out. No drama. Nothing thrown. Nothing raised. The hallway was quiet. My boots on the carpet were the only sound. My name is Brock Callahan. I'm 53 years old. I spent 24 years at Kellner Price Construction, the last 14 as Senior Vice President of Field Operations. Before that, I spent 12 years in the United States Marine Corps, enlisted at 17 with my mother's signature on the consent form. MOS 1371, combat engineer, 2 deployments including Iraq in 2003. Discharged as a staff sergeant at 29. Combat engineering is exactly what it sounds like. You build things under fire. Bridges, fortifications, barriers, structures that have to hold while people are trying to kill you. You learn 2 things fast. How to build something right the first time, and how to trust the men standing next to you. Everything else is noise. I joined Kellner Price the same year I got out. 29 years old with calloused hands, a DD-214, and no college degree. Walter Kellner hired me as a field superintendent on a warehouse project in Fort Worth. I walked the foundation before the first pour. I walked every foundation after that for 24 years. Let me tell you what I did at that company. Not in buzzwords, in concrete, literally. I ran field operations across 23 active job sites in 9 states. Hospitals, data centers, distribution warehouses, office towers. Every one of them had my fingerprints on it before a single yard of concrete was placed. I knew which foreman could handle a hospital job, where a mistolerance means someone's MRI doesn't calibrate, and which ones were built for warehouses where you push volume and keep the schedule tight. I got the call at 2 a.m. when a crane operator didn't show on a Houston site and I had a replacement there by 5. Not from a staffing database, from my phone, because I knew the man, knew his wife's name, knew his kid played hockey on Saturdays. 23 foremen, 14 superintendents, project managers in 9 states. I didn't recruit them from a list. I trained them, every single one, promoted them, stood next to them on their first big pour and showed them how to read the mud, how to feel when the slump was right without checking a gauge. I designed the crew patches they wore on their hard hats, a crossed hard hat and wrench with Callahan's crew around the perimeter. Marine-style unit insignia adapted for the field. It wasn't a logo. It was a bond. They called themselves Callahan's crew because that's what they were. When I started, Kellner Price was a $400 million regional contractor. Concrete and steel, mostly DFW Metro. When Cody Kellner fired me in that conference room, it was a $2.8 billion national commercial builder. I'm not saying I did that alone, but I'm saying every dollar of revenue that came from field execution, every project delivered on time, every punch list closed, every owner who called back for the next job, ran through my organization, through my people. You want to know what 24 years costs? It cost me my son's high school graduation. Travis was 18, cap and gown, the whole thing. Meg had the camera ready. I was supposed to be in the 3rd row. But a hospital project in Houston had a structural discrepancy in the shear wall reinforcement, the kind of thing that kills people if you pour over it. I drove 4 hours, was on site until midnight, standing under work lights with the structural engineer, checking every tie and splice by hand. Travis sent me a photo of himself in his cap and gown. Big smile. Thumbs up. I have that photo in my desk drawer. Haven't moved it in 4 years. My wife Meg, Margaret technically, but nobody calls her that except the IRS. She's 51. Registered nurse at Baylor Scott and White. She's moved twice for my career. Held the household together through deployments and 70-hour work weeks and seasons where I'd come home at 9 p.m. smelling like diesel and sunscreen and have nothing left to give. She's direct. She doesn't sugarcoat. She sees things before I do. Every time. Travis is 22 now. Apprentice ironworker at a commercial outfit in Fort Worth. Chose the trades over college. I respect that more than I let on. Claire is 17. Junior in high school. Runs cross country. Sharp enough to read a room without anyone explaining what's happening. Meg told me 3 years ago to stop carrying this company on my back. She said it sitting at the kitchen table on a Sunday night while I was answering emails from 3 different project managers. She said, "Brock, you're giving them everything, and they're giving you a paycheck and a title. That's not a partnership. That's a habit." I didn't listen. I stayed because Walter Kellner shook my hand and said, "You're the backbone of this place, Brock. I won't forget that." I believed him. Here's what happened after I walked out. I was halfway to the elevator when I remembered my composition notebook. 20 years of notes in the same handwriting. Meeting minutes, crew evaluations, schedule notes, concrete mix specs I'd tweaked over 2 decades. That notebook was my brain on paper. It was still in my desk. I doubled back. The conference room door was open. I wasn't trying to listen. I just heard it. Cody's voice, clear as a 2-way radio. He's a dinosaur, Trent. 53 years old. No degree. Still thinks you run a $2.8 billion company from a mud pit. Trent laughed. The kind of laugh that comes easy when you've never earned anything. Cody kept going. The crews will fall in line. They're hard hats. They go where the paycheck is. His little unit patches and crew cookouts. That's not leadership. That's a grown man playing army. I stood in that hallway for 4 seconds, thumb on the coin. Then I turned around, left the notebook where it was, and walked out of the building. The Texas heat hit me like an open oven door. 97 degrees, mid-July. The asphalt in the parking lot was soft under my boots. Heat shimmer rose off every surface. The cars, the concrete barriers, the steel light poles. I squinted against the sun and put on my sunglasses. My truck was where it always was. Far corner of the lot. 2012 Ford F 250. White. 214,000 miles. Paid off 8 years ago. Tool marks in the bed. Concrete dust ground into the dashboard, so deep I'd stopped trying to wipe it. Hard hat on the passenger seat next to a rolled set of blueprints and a pair of work gloves. The cab was an oven. I opened the door and let it breathe before I got in. I sat there for a while. Engine off, windows down, the heat settling around me like a weight. Cody Kellner had 16 months of management consulting experience at a firm that specialized in retail. Not construction, retail. He had never stood on a foundation pour, never read a set of structural drawings, never worn a hard hat that had dust on it. His still had the manufacturer's sticker on it, never peeled. His father gave him the COO title 6 months ago because he was his only son, and he loved him more than he loved his company. And now, Cody had given my job, 24 years of my life, to his fraternity brother from Penn, a man who came from a property management company and couldn't read a punch list if you stapled it to his forehead. I sat in my truck in the driveway for 10 minutes before I went inside. Engine off, thumb on the coin, just breathing. Meg opened the front door. She was still in her scrubs. She'd just gotten home from a shift. She looked at my face. She looked at the hard hat in my hand. She didn't ask what happened. She said, "So, you finally did it." I looked at her. They did it for me. That night I didn't sleep. Didn't try. Meg went to bed around 11. Claire was already in her room. I could hear the faint thump of music through her door, the way she always wound down after a long run. The house settled into that familiar quiet where the refrigerator hum becomes the loudest sound in the room. I sat at the kitchen table. 5:30 came, and I was still there. Black coffee from the dented Stanley thermos I'd carried to job sites for 15 years. Lid scratched to hell. Handle cracked where I'd dropped it off a scaffold in 2016. Still held heat better than anything they sell now. The coffee was the same brand I'd been drinking since the Marine Corps. Nothing special. Just hot and black and reliable. I had a new composition notebook open in front of me. Not the one I'd left behind. That one had 20 years of Kellner Price in it. This one was blank. Clean pages. I picked up a Bic ballpoint and wrote 2 headers at the top of the first page. People. Projects. Under people, I started writing names. Not from a database. From memory. Every foreman. Every superintendent. Every project manager I'd trained, promoted, or stood next to on their first major pour. I knew their phone numbers. I knew which ones had kids in travel ball, and which ones had wives who'd kill them if they moved states again. I knew who was 3 years from retirement, and who was hungry enough to take a risk. I wrote for an hour, filled 4 pages. Under projects, I listed every pending bid I knew Kellner Price had in the pipeline. The ones that hadn't been awarded yet. The ones where the general contractor or the owner had specifically asked for my involvement. The ones that would die the second the field organization disappeared. $890 million. That's what was sitting in that pipeline. I knew because I'd built the bid schedule myself. My phone rang at 6:12 a.m. I looked at the screen. Dale Fletcher. Dale was 56. Senior superintendent. 19 years working alongside me at Kellner Price. Former Army, 82nd Airborne, 6 years, came out as a sergeant. Built like a fire hydrant with hands like catcher's mitts. Wore one of my crew patches on his hard hat like a badge of honor. Dale was the kind of man who didn't waste words and didn't waste time. "I heard," he said. "No, hello. How many of us are going?" "I'm not asking anyone to do anything, Dale." "You're not asking. I'm telling you. How many?" I paused. Looked at the people list on the table. "How fast can you make some calls?" "Already started." By noon, I had 14 calls from Foreman. Not from men I'd called, from men who'd called me. Word moves fast on job sites. Faster than email. Faster than LinkedIn. A foreman on the San Antonio retail complex heard it from a concrete sub, who heard it from a project coordinator who was in the building when I walked out with my hard hat. By the time the sun went down on Wednesday, the phones were ringing nonstop. By Thursday afternoon, 72 hours after Cody Kellner told me the company needed scalable leadership, 23 foremen and 14 superintendents had emailed their resignation letters to Kellner Price Human Resources. Every single one. 37 people. The entire field leadership organization of a $2.8 billion construction company. Gone. If you've ever had your life's work handed to someone who couldn't carry your toolbox, hit that like button and subscribe. Every day brings completely new stories, each one more intense than the last. I registered Callahan Built LLC on a Monday morning, sat in a strip mall office in Arlington next to a notary who smelled like menthol cigarettes and asked me how to spell Callahan twice. Filed the articles of organization with the Texas Secretary of State, paid the fee with a personal check. Then I called Frank Mercer. Frank was 62, president of Mercer Surety Group. We'd known each other for 20 years. He bonded my first solo project back when Kellner Price was still a $200 million company, and I was a superintendent who'd never managed a surety relationship. We played poker quarterly, not for big money, for the conversation. Frank was a former Marine himself, 2 years of overlap with my service, though we didn't meet until the civilian side. Gravelly voice, handshake like a vice, the kind of man who looked you in the eye when he said something and meant every syllable. We met at his office the next morning. Oak desk, framed bond certificates on the wall going back 30 years, a Marine Corps flag in the corner, folded in a shadow box with his discharge papers behind glass. I laid out my plan, my team, my reputation, my personal assets, house, savings, retirement account, everything on the table. Frank listened. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and ran his thumb along the edge of his desk the way I run mine along the challenge coin. Brock, I've bonded you on jobs for 20 years. You bring me your team and your reputation. I'll write the paper. He looked at me. How fast can you get me a list? 2 weeks later, Callahan Built LLC had a surety line of credit for $15 million. Bonded, legal, ready to bid. I started rebidding the $890 million in pending contracts that Kellner Price could no longer staff. The bids went out on Callahan Built letterhead, clean, simple, no buzzwords. Just scope, schedule, price, and a personnel roster that read like a who's who of commercial construction in the Southwest. Our first office was a rented construction trailer on a job site in Arlington. Double wide, dented, the air conditioner rattled like a diesel engine. I set up a folding table, 2 chairs, and a whiteboard. My hard hat hung on a nail by the door. My foremen started showing up on the first Monday. They came with their tools, their trucks, and their patches. They pinned the new Callahan Built logo next to the old crew patches on their hard hats. Nobody took the old ones off. One foreman, a younger guy named Garrett I'd trained 5 years ago on a hospital project in Plano, brought his whole crew of 8 with him, set his toolbox down in the gravel, and said, "They said if I went, they went." The clients started calling before I'd finished setting up the whiteboard. The general contractor on the Dallas Medical Center project, a $200 million build, mid-pour on the parking structure, called me directly. "Brock, I don't care what logo is on the truck. I need your guys on this site Monday morning, or we're 30 days behind by Friday." 3 general contractors pulled Kellner Price from active bid lists within the first month and added Callahan Built, a developer in Houston I'd known for 15 years, a man whose daughter's wedding I'd attended, whose hand I'd shaken on every project since 2009, shifted a $120 million hospital project to Callahan Built without rebidding. His contract allowed it. Key person clause. The named key person was me. While my trailer filled up with people and plans, Kellner Price was learning what happens when you fire the man holding the roof up. Glenn Stafford was the first to see it. Glenn was 48, VP of pre-construction. Good at his job, he could estimate a project to within 2% and build a bid package that won work. But his job meant exactly nothing without field crews to execute what he bid. A bid without a builder is just paper. The resignation emails started hitting his inbox at 7:14 a.m. on Wednesday, 18 hours after my firing. First 2 names he recognized, then 5 more. Then they didn't stop. By Thursday afternoon, 37 resignation letters sat in the Kellner Price HR system. Glenn pulled up the active project staffing matrix on his monitor, the same spreadsheet I'd built and maintained for a decade, and watched it turn red. Cell by cell, project by project. 23 active job sites. Not a single qualified foreman left on any of them. He printed the matrix. He printed every resignation letter. He carried the stack down the hall to Cody's office. Cody was on the phone, talking to a reporter from the Dallas Business Journal about strategic modernization and next-generation leadership. His LinkedIn post from Tuesday: Day 1 of a new era at Kellner Price. Bold leadership. Lean operations. The future is now. #NextGen, #innovation. Had 47 likes, most of them from people who didn't work in construction. Glenn set the stack on the desk. Cody held up one finger. Keep talking. Glenn didn't move. Cody ended the call. We have a situation, Glenn said. What kind of situation? Cody, every foreman in this company just quit. Every superintendent. Every project manager Brock trained. We have 23 active sites and no one qualified to run a single one of them. The room went quiet. Trent Prescott was in the corner. His Instagram story from the day before, still live. A selfie in a brand new hard hat with the manufacturer's sticker still on it. Caption reading, Head of Field Ops, with a flexed bicep emoji. He spoke first. So, we hire replacements. It's just labor. Post the positions. Offer a signing bonus. Move on. Glenn stared at him the way you'd stare at someone who just asked what a foundation was for. It's not just labor. These are licensed, bonded foremen with decades of field experience and personal relationships with every subcontractor and inspector on every site. You can't post that on LinkedIn. You can't train it in a weekend. These men knew the names of every inspector's kids. They knew which concrete batch plants run hot and which ones you can trust on a Saturday pour. That's not a skill set. That's a lifetime. Cody picked up his phone. Dialed my number. Voicemail. Tried again. Voicemail. 3 more times. Voicemail. He called Dale Fletcher's cell. A recorded message. The number you have reached has been disconnected. Then the surety company called. Not Frank Mercer. Kellner Price used a different surety. Commonwealth Bonding out of Atlanta. They'd seen the personnel changes in an industry trade report. They were requesting updated financial statements, an amended key personnel list, and a meeting with the CEO within 10 business days to discuss bonding capacity. The bonding review had begun. In construction, losing your bonding capacity is like a pilot losing his license. You don't fly. You don't bid. You don't build. You sit on the ground and watch the sky. Cody sat behind my old desk. The crew patch he'd pulled off the corkboard and thrown in the trash on Tuesday was still in the wastebasket. He hadn't even emptied it. His slim-fit shirt was dark under both arms now, not from the Texas heat, because the office was air-conditioned to 68 degrees. From fear. 12 miles away, I stood in a rented trailer in Arlington, surrounded by 37 men in hard hats with crew patches on the side. The whiteboard behind me listed the first 14 contracts we were bidding. $890 million in pending work that Kellner Price could no longer staff, no longer bond, and no longer win. I looked at the board, looked at my people, took a sip from the dented Stanley thermos. We had work to do. The first default hit in week 3, a $45 million retail complex in San Antonio. Kellner Price was the general contractor's concrete and structural subcontractor. Foundation, columns, elevated deck. The pour schedule called for 600 yards on a Saturday morning. Nobody showed. Not a foreman, not a finisher, not a single man who knew where the embeds were set, or which pump truck was staged for the north elevation. Trent Prescott sent 2 project coordinators from the Dallas office. Neither had ever been on a pour. The general contractor's superintendent stood at the edge of the excavation and watched 2 men in khakis stare at a set of structural drawings they couldn't read. The GC filed a default notice that Monday. Liquidated damages at $14,000 per day started accruing by Tuesday. Week 5. 3 more defaults: a warehouse in Memphis, a data center shell in Phoenix, a parking structure in Austin. The Austin project was the worst. Subcontractors walked off the site when they saw the replacement foreman Trent had pulled from a temporary staffing agency. The man had residential framing experience. They were pouring post-tensioned concrete on a 5-level parking deck. The subs packed their tools, called their dispatchers, and were gone before lunch. Then Houston, the hospital project. An OSHA compliance officer showed up for a routine inspection at the medical center site, the one where the key person clause had already triggered the owner's exit. But the project was still technically Kellner Price's until the paperwork transferred. Trent's hand-picked replacement foreman had repositioned a tower crane without filing an updated load path analysis or notifying the safety officer. Nobody was hurt, but the stop work order shut down a $200 million project and made the evening news in Houston. The reporter mispronounced Kellner Price. Nobody corrected her because nobody from the company returned the call. Commonwealth Bonding out of Atlanta downgraded Kellner Price's bonding capacity by 60%. Without bonding, they couldn't bid new work. Without new bids, the pipeline dried up overnight. Glenn Stafford's pre-construction department, 12 estimators, 4 project coordinators, 3 admin staff, had nothing to estimate, nothing to coordinate, nothing to file. Glenn resigned quietly in month 2, took a position at a competitor in Austin. I heard he didn't even clean out his desk, just took his laptop bag and his coffee mug and walked out. Liquidated damages and surety claims piled up across all 4 defaulted projects. $167 million. The number sat on the balance sheet like a tumor. Kellner Price's legal team, 2 in-house attorneys, and an outside firm on retainer, spent every hour negotiating settlements they couldn't afford on projects they couldn't finish. Layoffs hit the office staff, estimators, coordinators, accounts, payable clerks who'd been there since before Cody was born. The building got quieter every week. The parking lot got emptier. The coffee pot on the 6th floor stopped being refilled because the admin who'd done it for 9 years was gone. Walter Kellner watched it happen. 68 years old. Started as a concrete subcontractor in 1982 with a single truck and a set of forms he'd bought secondhand. Built a $2.8 billion company with his hands and his word. And he watched it bleed out from a corner office he'd stopped going to because he couldn't stand the silence in the hallways. He fired Cody and Trent on the same day. Month 12. Same conference room. Same mahogany table. Cody's LinkedIn post about bold leadership was still live. He'd never taken it down. Trent's Instagram story about being head of field ops had been archived, but the internet remembers. Walter didn't yell. He sat at the head of the table, the same seat Cody had taken when he'd fired me, and he looked at his son with eyes that were red and dry at the same time. "You cost me everything. Get out of my building." Trent opened his mouth. Walter didn't look at him. Trent closed his mouth. They both left. Cody's Range Rover, black, leased, still pristine, pulled out of the parking lot for the last time. The dealer plates were finally gone, replaced by vanity plates that read KPCOO. He'd have to return those. 6 months later, Kellner Price Construction filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The trustee entertained acquisition bids. 3 came in. 2 were from out-of-state firms looking to cherry-pick equipment and real estate. The third was from Callahan Built, LLC. My bid was $0.12 on the dollar. The trustee accepted. The signing was held at Kellner Price headquarters. Same conference room, same mahogany table, same framed photo on the wall. The Plano Strip Mall, 1982. Walter Kellner, with concrete dust on his boots. Nobody had moved it. Nobody had touched it. It had just hung there, through everything, watching. I sat down at the table. Walter sat across from me. His flannel shirt was wrinkled. His reading glasses hung from his neck on a cord. The calluses on his hands, faint now, relics of the days when he poured his own footings, caught the light when he set them on the table. His eyes were red, but he extended his hand. I should have listened to you, Brock. I should have listened 20 times. I shook his hand, not out of triumph, out of respect for the man Walter used to be. The man who hired a 29-year-old Marine with no degree and said, "Show me what you can do." The attorneys slid the purchase agreement across the table. 46 pages. I didn't need to read them. My attorney had gone through every line. I picked up a pen. Not a silver pen, not a fancy pen. A Bic ballpoint, the same kind I'd used on every punch list, every daily report, every crew evaluation for 24 years. Blue ink, medium point. I signed. Looked at Walter. I sat in this chair 24 years ago when you hired me. I told you I'd take care of your company. I meant it then. I mean it now. Walter nodded. His jaw moved, but nothing came out. He looked at the photo on the wall behind me. The strip mall. The young man he'd been. The company he'd built and lost, and just sold for 12 cents on the dollar to the only man who ever really ran it. He stood up, shook my hand one more time, walked out. I sat in that conference room for a while after everyone left. The attorneys, the trustee, the notary, all gone. Just me and the mahogany table and the framed photo and the silence. Callahan Built at 18 months. $3.1 billion in contracted backlog. 41 Foreman. Projects in 12 states. The trailer in Arlington was gone. We had a real office now, a converted warehouse space with concrete floors and metal desks. My office had no mahogany. It had a steel desk, a hard hat on the hook behind the door, the composition notebook I'd started at the kitchen table that first morning, and the crew patch design I'd drawn on graph paper 15 years ago, framed now, hanging on the wall next to the door where everyone could see it. Cody Kellner was last seen consulting for a co-working space startup in Austin. Trent Prescott moved back to Philadelphia. Neither one has worked in construction since. Neither one will. That evening, I drove to the Arlington job site. The first project Callahan Built broke ground on, a medical office building, 6 stories of steel and concrete rising against the Texas sky. The crews had gone home. The generators were off. Just the steel skeleton standing there in the golden hour light, rebar and column forms catching the last of the sun as it slid from amber to purple over the western skyline. I parked the F250 in the gravel, got out, put my hard hat on, walked the foundation the way I've walked every foundation for 24 years. Slow, methodical. Ran my hand along a steel column, still warm from the sun. Solid, plumb. Right. The crew patches were stickered to the construction trailer door. 41 of them now. Each one a man I'd trained, a family I knew, a handshake I'd kept. I drove home with the windows down. Warm breeze, the first cool air of evening coming through the cab. The highway was lined with cranes. Every third building in DFW going up or coming down. I knew the project attached to most of them now. Some of them were mine. Meg was on the back porch with 2 cold cores on the railing, still in her scrubs. She'd just gotten home herself. The sky behind her was going purple and dark at the edges. I sat down next to her. She handed me the long neck. I took a long pull. Cold. Same brand since the Marine Corps. My phone buzzed. Text from Travis. Saw the news. You bought it? The whole thing? I typed back. The whole thing. 3 words came back. About damn time. Inside the house, Claire's music was playing softly through her bedroom door. Homework spread out on her desk, probably. She'd know by morning. She'd have something sharp and quiet to say about it, the way she always did. Meg didn't say anything for a while. We just sat there. 2 cores on the railing, the sky going dark, the hum of the neighborhood settling in for the night. Somewhere to the south, a crane light blinked red against the purple sky. Then she said, "You going to be okay running 2 companies?" I looked at her. It's 1 company now. Same crew. Better foundation. She put her head on my shoulder. I took another pull of the cores. My thumb found the challenge coin in my pocket. Bronze. Worn smooth. 24 years of finding it in moments exactly like this one. You want to know the difference between a building and a company? A building stands on concrete and rebar. A company stands on the men who pour it. Fire the men, and you're just standing on dirt. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.